Skilen. For our project today, we're going to work on this piece that I call Field of Flowers, and it has a couple of techniques. So we're going to be cutting up some glass and fusing it, as well as using enamels to paint. So this project only requires two turns in the kiln. It doesn't take very long. It's an intermediate, I would say, kind of project, and I hope you enjoy. So as always, I like to start with determining what slumping mold I'm going to use at the end of the project. So I'll be using this mold. It has very, very nice shapes on the edges, and it has a curvature on the inside. It's really nice. And then I'll have a flat rectangular bottom. So here's the sketch of my design. So the concept behind this is to have like a painting in the center and a frame all around. Now our mold is 3 3/4 inches by 4.5 inches. And so we have to work within that. The final size of this piece is going to be 4 inches by 4 3/4 inches. So it's slightly larger than our mold, about 1/4 inch each side total. So it's an extra 1/4 inch in height and an extra 1/4 inch in width. And having done this piece before, I know that it's not going to give it a big lip, so it's not going to be a problem. So the size of our canvas is going to be 3 inches by 3 3/4 inches, which tells me that my sides are going to be 1/2 inch in width. So I want to do the sides in black and white. So our picture canvas will be on this white iridescent glass, this opaque white iridescent. Bullseye is 11331, and an iridescent glass has like a metallic sheen to it, so when the light hits just right, you can see this rainbow effect. So this side is not iridized, so it's just plain white, but this side is iridized, and you can see all these beautiful colors. So when we place the glass to put it in the kiln, we need to be careful that we make sure that the iridized side is facing up. So this is the rectangle that's going to be behind our painting, is going to be with this iridescent white and 3 inches by 3 3/4 inches, along with these 4 squares in the corners, which will also be out of this 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, so 4 of those. And then the rest of the frame, these rectangles, will be out of black, so 130 from Bullseye. So we're going to have 2 rectangles that are 3 inches by 1/2 inch, and then 2 rectangles that are 3 3/4 inches by 1/2 inch. So so technically at the end, the tecta should also measure the total outside length and width of this. So technically it should be 4 by 4 3/4, but I won't cut it until I've cut all my pieces, assembled them, and measured to make sure that my tecta will be as big as my cut pieces together. I've done that error before. I don't want to do it again. So we're going to start with cutting, and then we're going to paint on our glass and do our first fuse. I'm gonna need to put this on something so my little squares don't fall into these grooves. Perfect. And we're gonna measure just to double check. So, yeah, see? There is a slight difference, like 4 1/8 by 4 7/8. So the Tecta's gonna have to be a little larger. Now let's triple check. Perfect. Fits perfectly. Now I'm gonna clean my pieces off camera because there's a lot of them, and then we're gonna start tracing our flowers. So I retraced the area around my flower to make sure that the Tecta is centered over it. And what I'm gonna do is I like to give this piece dimension and depth. So how I'm gonna do this is the black outline of these flowers and leaves is gonna be on top of the glass, on the front of this piece of clear glass, and then the colors are going to be on the back of the glass. So I'm going to be using some glass line in black, so it's like a glass paint, and I believe this is the thinnest tip, and I'm going to trace the lines. And if I mess up, it's okay, because I can always, once it dries, I can always scratch off the mistakes with an X-Acto knife or a blade. Okay, so the black outline lines are done, and I did them mostly off camera because I was sitting at a weird angle, and the only way to get comfortable was to put my big head under the camera. So the lines aren't looking very dark right now because they dry to a light gray, but once they're fired, see, you could still see some of the lines here. They're drying. Once they're fired, they'll fire to a black. So we have to let this piece dry before we can turn it over and paint on the back. So while this is drying, I'll explain what I'm using to paint on the back. I'm using these colors. They're enamel powders, so glass paint basically. These are from a company called Kaiser Glass Designs. I got this little tray at Michael's, and you can put your paints into these little containers, and so I hydrated my enamels. So I added some water and a bit of glass tack to them, this stuff, glass tack gel, like a dot, and some water, but distilled water. And even in my troughs over here, it's distilled water, because you don't want to have other minerals get mixed in with your enamels as you're firing, because you don't know what chemical reaction will occur during the firing. As well as, like, I put these in these little containers and I use them, but I don't use all the paint that I've prepared, and sometimes they'll dry out. Well, dried out is still the same as powder form, and I could just rehydrate them and use them. And if you don't use distilled water, you might have some fuzzy little creatures that grow in here, so you definitely don't want that. So I'll be using those paints with just regular paintbrush brushes, and we'll be painting on the back. Okay, we can see now the piece is completely dry because it's all a light gray color now. So I'm going to place it on a white piece of paper with the painted side down so I could see the design, and I'm going to use my enamels to paint. It's painting just like any other paint. And it's okay if I come out of the lines. I mean, this is a art piece, so it's okay. Just want to make sure my big fat head doesn't end up under the camera. I actually kind of like it when the paint comes out of the lines. Gives a nice effect. Here it is. Now I'm going to do some cleanup on some of the blue over here where it really just the lines really go beyond the black. But now I want to let this piece dry completely before I go to the next step. So now my painting has completely dried. We'll turn it over and we can see what it looks like. I just love how this came out, but you'll see some bits on this blue flower like really extend over here. I said I like it when it goes past the lines like a smidgen, like over here on the leaf, but this is a little too much, so I'm gonna scrape it off. So to make sure that I don't remove too much paint off my off the back of this piece, what I'll do is I'll place it back on my original sketch. Kind of line it up as best as I can, and I could take a thin Sharpie, just trace where these ends should be. Oh, it doesn't have to be perfect, and again the sides are going to be black so you won't really see it, but you know, you want to try to do as clean a job as possible. That's not my X-Acto knife. So I'll go in and scrape some of this off, making sure not to go past those lines that I just drew. Okay, so I've cleaned off this edge over here and a bit around the petals. And you'll see the Sharpie marks are still there, and I can't go in and clean them off because I have the black paint on top and it'll just ruin everything. But like I said in my previous video, Sharpie will burn off in the kiln, so it doesn't matter. It's fine if it's there. So now we're going to assemble everything on the kiln shelf because I would like to put some frit powder in between the two layers, because last time I did this, the layer, the clear glass and then the iridescent white had a few large bubbles, and so I want to try to get rid of that. And the best way to do that is to apply a bit of clear powder in between both layers. So I'll be applying some clear powder onto this, onto my glass. So as always, I'm wearing my breathing mask for safety precautions so I don't breathe in any of this glass powder. So I'm going to start with putting a bit of glass tack gel directly onto my thin fire paper, my papyrus, so that these pieces hopefully don't move too much, because I want them to stay stable while I put some glass powder on them. And I haven't mentioned this before, but glass tack gel burns away in the kiln and leaves no residue. So we're going to assemble our pieces. So I made sure that my white here had the iridized, nice rainbowy side up, and I have to make sure that I do that as well with all these little corner pieces. Okay, and last one. Okay. So I'm not an expert cutter yet, and so I have no delusions that this is going to be completely straight, but the fusing kind of melds everything together and tends to hide the sins. So I'm going to use my sifter. Now I'm going to use the brush. I have to be very careful not to knock the pieces out of place. And that's why one of the reasons I put the gel underneath it, because the first time I did this, I didn't put the gel underneath it and just the pieces started flying everywhere. Because if I leave the powder, it will also fuse to the piece. And I don't want to do that. Okay. And now we're going to add the pièce de résistance, our painting, inside its frame. Make sure it's nicely centered. And there it is. It's gonna go into the kiln for a full fuse, and then once it's done, it's a slumping and the project will be done. So here's our piece out of the kiln. Remember we had put the clear powdered glass between the two layers of glass to reduce the amount of bubbles. Well, and then I took a brush and I brushed them off. Well, not all of them came off. And you can see, I don't know if you can see here, they're edges that are really sharp, and we don't want to keep these. So what I'm going to do is, if you have a grinder, you can take it to a grinder and grind the sides off. I don't have a grinder, I have a Dremel, but I'll use the Dremel for different shaping techniques. What I do have are diamond pads. So I'll use the diamond pads and sand down these edges. So I'll start with a 200 and a 400, then finish it off with a 400 for a smoother finish. And just like when you're working with glass powders, I'm wearing my mask as I'm doing this, and I'm also working with wet. So I dip these in water before I start sanding, so this reduces the amount of glass powder that goes into the into my work environment, and creates a little bit of lubrication to make the sanding easier. Okay, with the sanding all done, the edges are all nice and smooth, and I've cleaned off this piece, and now we can take a bit of a closer look. So because we painted the lines on the top of the clear glass and we put the color on the back of the clear glass, it gives it a nice depth to the image. It's like a bit of a optical illusion, I find. So the next step with this is to put it on our slumping mold. This is the one we had picked at the beginning of the project. Put it on and take it to the kiln for its second and last firing. So I'll see you again once this project is done for the final reveal. Piece out of the kiln, nice and shiny. It was slumped. It wasn't slumped very, very deeply, so the bottom didn't flatten out. So I added some little feet so that it can stay stable when you put it down. And I'm very happy with it. So I hope you enjoyed this project. So I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed to my channel. And I'll see you in the next video. I'll leave you with a few shots of the final project.